come in?
The original Psychonauts released back in 2005, and while it ended up gaining a big cult following years afterwards, it was kind of a commercial flop on release, so it seemed likely that we would never really see a sequel. Well, we finally ended up getting one, 16 years later. And how's it stack up to the original? Well, I think it stands on its own as a pretty great game. While it's not perfect by any means, the sequel does live up to the original, and in fact expands upon some of those ideas introduced in the first to lend itself to a more adult story. Double Fine was really able to put in some extra polish on this game, and it shows throughout. I don't think I experienced a single glitch throughout my entire playthrough besides maybe some texture popping in a few places. But other than that, this thing is polished to a brilliant shine. The footage you're watching here was captured on both a PC and an Xbox Series S. But I did have to play most of it on the Series S because my computer is still in potato land. The first thing you're going to notice when you play Psychonauts 2, as compared to the first one, is that 16 years have gone by. Yeah, it's crazy how much that'll improve the looks of things. No longer are hills made out of 12-sided polygons, but they actually look pretty lush and, well, I don't want to say realistic. Everything here is pretty cartoony. It does look really good. In fact, all of the environments look incredible. There may be a few exceptions to that, but for the most part, all the worlds here are really well designed and fit in with the story. They're not just places you explore. Early on in the game, Raz causes a fellow Psychonaut to develop a gambling addiction by connecting some thoughts in her head that he really shouldn't have. And she used to be a doctor, so the level is like all of these things from a hospital combined with a casino, and it leads to some really funny jokes. But also just the world looks so imaginative, and that's the thing I really want to nail with this review is the imagination of Psychonauts. You don't really see anything like it in a lot of other games. Like, this game does not look as good as, say, Ratchet and Clank with its big AAA studio budget. I mean, I don't know how much money Double Fine had here, but things look good enough to fit the art style here, which is still that kind of Tim Burton-y, exaggerated eyes and everything. All the characters look pretty good. I'm still a fan of most of the ones from the first game. I am a little bit disappointed that none of the campers made it in from the last game, but they kind of hint towards a DLC at the end of the game that may see you return to Whispering Rock Summer Camp, and I would really like that. I want to go beat up Bobby Zilch. And while I'm on the subject of presentation, I might want to talk about the sound design here. The soundtrack is once again excellent. It has great mixing across the board, all the enemies have different unique sounds, and nothing ever sounds like it's drowning anything else out. The soundtrack is all kind of big band pieces. A lot of the music in the soundtrack kind of reminds me of old Bond films, movies like The Incredibles. You know, just a really solid, like, spy thriller kind of soundtrack. But there are multiple musical numbers, which I'm normally not a fan of, but, I mean, they got Jack Black, man. They got Jack Black to sing a song. And there's also this nice little punk song your baby brother is listening to, and you use that sound to find him throughout the camp, and it kind of slaps, actually. And speaking of the other characters, like Jack Black and your baby brother, the voice acting here is all phenomenal. I don't think there was a badly read line in the entire script, and that is pretty impressive. You really get the impression here that everybody in this cast was really giving it their all. I'm pretty sure all of the original cast returned. Rasputin's played by the same guy. I really like Dr. Lobato and his, like, you know, whingy supervillain voice. It's really cool.
Before the procedure, it's very important that we clean out your dentist cut. You don't want any dirty. Go away!
Each character has their own voice and a unique design, and you really feel like you know that character after just spending a little bit of time with them. Like, you hear their voice and see their character design, and you're like, oh, okay, that's what this character is all about. And they're just genuinely really great, heartfelt performances all throughout. Especially from Ford Cruller, actually, who was kind of a joke in the last game. He was just kind of this crazy, kooky old man. But we'll get more into it in the story section of the review here, but he really has a lot of chances to shine as you explore his character.
War changes everybody. Inside all of us, we all have dark roots. Well, sometimes we need that darkness to survive. Careful. Sometimes it's hard to get it back in the bottle.
Now, before I get into talking about the story, I do want to talk about the gameplay side of things a little bit, because this is the only section where I have things that I actually kind of disliked about Psychonauts. Now, there was nothing really frustrating or game-breaking here, more like kind of just small annoyances that popped up from time to time. The platforming can still have a little bit of old-school jank, like if you're trying to switch rails, sometimes things don't line up quite the way you wanted them to, and swinging around sometimes feels a little sticky. But for the most part, Raz controls pretty well here. Worlds are wide open, and they encourage and reward exploration. There's little collectibles and money hidden around every corner. You can still find these memory vaults, which I was excited to see return largely unchanged. Like, they still have the little slideshow whenever you unlock a traumatic memory for a character. The combat here is still kinda clunky. It's not nearly as bad as Psychonauts 1, but thank God it's not, because it's been 16 years. They've had time to clean up that stuff. There are many more enemy types in Psychonauts 2, and they just kinda keep introducing them all throughout the game, up until the last 2 or 3 levels, I would say. There is a wide variety of enemies, but I think that's both a pro and a con for Psychonauts 2. Because a lot of these enemies require special skills in order to deal with. And towards the end of the game, when they start throwing all these different enemies at you at once, you have to constantly bring up the Psy power menu and switch between different powers that, you know, they're meant to deal with certain types of enemies. Like, there's these little doubt goblins that you have to set on fire. There's this judge character that you can use your telekinesis on. Grab his gavel and throw it back at him. There's panic attacks that you can't really attack too well unless you slow them down. But switching between all of these enemies means going into this menu and changing out powers pretty much all the time. And that can feels like it breaks the flow of combat a little bit towards the latter half of the game, but again, that's not really a deal breaker. It was just kind of annoying. Not enough to put me off of Psychonauts 2 in general. The only other problems I have with the gameplay side of things might be some of the progression systems. In this one, you level up, and you can level up your different psi powers in your journal. And these can all be maxed out pretty quickly. I don't think I quite had them all maxed out towards the end, but I had the ones that I cared about. But there is also a pin system in the game, and I am convinced that you never need to touch it to fully experience Psychonauts 2. You only get 3 slots for pins, and there's a lot of them. I think that the pin system could be redone better. As of right now, you only have the 3 slots that you can use for pins, and some of these powers are not really powers, they're just cosmetic changes to Rasputin. And I feel like you should just have the 3 for cosmetics and general pins that modify Rasputin. And then I think you should have 1 slot for every psi power, which would be 9 more slots altogether. As the pin system stands right now, I was able to equip 3 pins that I thought sounded kind of cool, and then never touch the system again. I never felt the need to. All of the pins are expensive, and none of them seem to really have that big of an effect on the game for me to actually want or need those. So the pin system could be totally ignored, but I would like to see it expanded on just a little bit to make it more useful. Now, with that out of the way, those are really my only 2 problems with Psychonauts. Everything else is really, really good. And the story is no exception here. I'm not going to talk about any spoilers, because it's only been 2 weeks since release, so you should really go buy it yourself and experience the story firsthand. I will say that it did throw me for a couple of loops, which is good for a spy thriller. It should do that. There were a few twists in the story that I just legitimately did not see coming. The story is largely character-driven. There are the Psychic Six, and the story is mostly going to see you playing therapist for different members of that group. And the themes really dig into some adult stuff. There is depictions of gambling problems, this harrowing level based on alcohol abuse, brought on by grief from loss of a loved one. And not only did this game make me laugh a whole bunch, it also, I'll admit it, it made me cry at a few parts. I teared up a bit. Now, the gameplay is pretty good, but I found myself just wanting to get through the gameplay to the next part of the story, because I was really invested in this story with Rasputin and Ford Cruller and the other Psychonauts. I wanted to see what the twists were. I was genuinely curious about what was going on in this story. And while the final boss fight was kind of underwhelming, I will say that the rest of it is very well done. I don't think I've seen another game that's quite based on empathy and healing the way Psychonauts 2 is. I really had a blast with Psychonauts 2, and I really can't plead you enough to go buy it or just get it on Game Pass, and enjoy the hell out of it yourself, too. I'm gonna give this one a 9 out of 10. Yeah, I don't think I can give it anything less than a 9 out of 10. I had a big goofy smile on my face the entire time I was playing it, and it just made me feel so good. The jokes are funny, it makes you cry sometimes, the combat feels good, if a little clunky. You know, it's just a really good game, and I wish more games were like that. Now, editing this footage, I want to go play it again. So, this review was a little bit more off the cuff than usual. If you've watched my other videos, you know that usually I like to go off of a script, but this week we've been going through the process of moving, stuff like that. So I didn't have as much time, but I really wanted to get this review out, so I just kind of turned the microphone on and started going. If you think the free-flowing thought process is good, or not, leave me a comment. Let me know which one you prefer, what I should do next, and, you know, if you made it to this part, why don't you subscribe, because that makes me happy. Every day I get a new subscriber. Thank you very much for watching, and I will see you next time. Bye-bye.
Well, this is the campground. Dr. Touch and Artie used to like to come here.
They like to get high out here.
So, you're saying they're up there?
Yep. The view up there is amazing.
Ha ha!